Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's ContainerJournal.com program, brought to you by Techstrong and Unscript. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of Techstrong Learning, and we have an exciting panel ahead. First, I do need to cover just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, maybe you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after our live session concludes. You can engage with our speakers today in two different ways. The first is the chat tab. You'll find that on the right side of your screen. I'd like you to go ahead and start warming that up for us now by letting us know from where you are joining us. Right next to that chat tab, you'll see there's a Q&A option. For any questions that you have for our speakers today, I do want you to submit those into the Q&A portion, just so that we make sure that we have them for tracking and we can be sure to get to them toward the end of our program. We will launch a couple of polls throughout today's discussion, so please do respond to those. We'd like to hear your feedback. And if you navigate to the handouts panel, you'll see there are about 5 resources there for you, so feel free to grab those at your own leisure. And of course, before we close out, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around to see if your name is called at the end. And our topic today is automating day 2 operations, best practices and outcomes. And I'm joined by 3 speakers today, and we're going to kind of go around and introduce ourselves. So starting off with Abhishek Saxena, CEO of Unscript. Abhishek, you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Cody. Great to be here today. I'm Abhishek. I'm co-founder and CEO at Unscript, a startup with the mission to make day 2 operations faster, leaner, and smarter. Prior to founding Unscript, I co-founded another startup called Orcus. We were a Gartner Pool vendor in the cloud access governance space, acquired by Austin-based SailPoint. I've been building products for the enterprise for the past 20 years at companies like Cisco, Arista, and a few other startups.
Thank you, Abhishek. Our next speaker today is Akon Day, CEO at dgraph Labs. Thank you for joining us, Akon.
Thanks, Cody. And thanks, Abhishek, for inviting me as well. My name is Akon Day. I'm the CEO at dgraph Labs, an enterprise-grade open-source scalable graph database with a cloud offering, and passionate about operability and operational excellence. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you all.
Well, thanks for being here, Akon. And our final speaker today is Sri Sridharan, Senior Director of Systems Reliability Engineering at Thoughtspot. Sri, thank you so much for being here. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Cody. So I'm Sri. I manage the global support function and the SRE function at Thoughtspot. We are a BI data analytics company. And prior to Thoughtspot, I was with Nutanix, managing the support for America's West. So thank you for having me here today, Cody and Abhishek. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So everyone, let's go ahead and get today kicked off with a question, not only for our speakers, but for our audience as well. So I'm going to get this first poll launched. But in the meantime, while our audience responds to that, to Abhishek, Akon, and Sri, what are some significant pain points that you faced with manual operations?
I can go first, Cody. If that's okay with you, Abhishek and Akon. So there are two aspects that are concerns with manual operations. One is the cost, and the second is the scale. And for cost, there are again 2 reasons. One is manual operations can be error-prone, and sometimes that can be very expensive. I have had an instance where something went wrong with the manual operations, and some of the customers encountered significant revenue impact due to that. The second cost aspect is the headcount cost. As you know, in any company, the headcount is the most expensive line item in your P&L. And with manual operations, it's very difficult to grow linearly with the number of headcount that we would need. And the scale is another aspect where the logistics, the coverage, the capacity, and all that need to be taken care of. So those are the 2 pain points that I have encountered with manual operations.
Check anything from your side?
Sure. So at the risk of sounding a bit dated right now, I'm reminded of this British sitcom called IT Crowd about 20 years ago, I think. And so it's about two tech support guys who are basically what the day looks like. The phone rings. The guy almost always says, "Hey, have you tried turning it on and off again, or is it off and on again?" And that's the life of these guys, right? So 20 years later, things have not really changed a whole lot. That's what we are doing. The days are very interrupt driven at SRE and DevOps teams, but we get these tickets. We take like a quick 5-minute look at things, and then life goes on, right? Now, what's the problem? It's an inefficient way of doing things, right? Each one of these phone calls takes up to 30 minutes and takes me away from doing the things that I was actually hired to do, right? So it's very inefficient. The other thing, it's just really a story. We tried writing some of these things down when we were in our hyperscale phase post acquisition at Orcus. And so we created these wikis, call them playbooks, so document processes. But these processes are still error prone, right? Whatever is manual is still error prone. And so I've had instances personally where some fat fingering happened and my production instance was wiped out. We spent half a day trying to figure out what to do next. Several team members were kind of on call trying to rescue it, right? So it's very inefficient and error prone.
I think there's other angles to this as well, and which a lot of times we don't think about. But for instance, inconsistency between dev, staging, and production environments. Like you test something in the dev environment, it works fine. You put it in staging, it works fine, and then you put in production, and it's just different. So to be able to have that consistency and the ability to be able to move from one to the other stage and test your processes and your procedures is important. There's disconnect between developers and operations folks often. Like developer says it works on my machine, and why doesn't it work in your production? So there's always a disconnect there. Manual runbooks are error prone, as Abhishek says, and it's always out of sync with the production and code. Like your code always is a few steps ahead of what your production processes are. And then there are issues around security vulnerabilities, etc. Like you have credentials that are floating around. People have things written down on pieces of paper, and those get passed around. People sharing screens and things like that. Passwords being written down in front of people. So there's a whole bunch of things that can go wrong. And then at the end, and most importantly, if you have test-driven development, right? You've got Terraform and Helm charts and all those kind of things to put your infrastructure in place. Why don't you have the same kind of rigor and processes on your day-to-day job to keep your system running? So that is, I think, these are a few things that we need to think about when we put our systems out there and in production.
Great, thank you for that, Akon. Let's go ahead and look at the results from this poll, and let me know what you guys think. Any of these results surprise you, or anything that you expected?
Seems very expected. 51% on wasted. The IT crowd story rings true.
I think the on-call burnout is something that's being understated, under-recognized, but that's one of the biggest problems that you see. That people get really burnt out after being on call for a long time.
Yeah.
And along with that, the employee morale is connected to
Correct.
both repetitive tasks as well as the morale.
So we'll move on to our next point, but Abhishek, we'll open it up with you. What kind of organizational or non-technical challenges are you facing in automating production operations?
So automation is a team sport, and with any team sport, stewardship is really important. So why is that? When we create some automation, very likely multiple departments within a company will use it, right? And so what we need from top is basically a cohesive leadership and vision that drives the implementation of automation, right? So having that and with a well-defined set of goalposts, right, for the stakeholders. So what are we going to get? Who's going to do it, right? These are some of the cultural aspects. Then there's also the aspect of having processes, right? So most organizations have some processes, and when they are adopting automation, many times what we find is that we are trying to work the automation around the process, but that's really not a good way of doing things. What we should be doing is making sure that it's the automation first solution, and the processes are really more there to help these implementations, right? So for example, let's say my change uh, my change approval needs is manual, and it needs to be done. So if I'm trying to automate something around this, maybe what I need to do is change my process and have that approval done upfront before the ticket is opened, rather than make my automation go and handle do all of these things.
Maybe I'll go. I think some of the biggest problems are around risks of entrusting production environments to people who are not necessarily fully trained. There's always a gap there. So training and entrusting production, both credentials and things like that, to folk who are not necessarily up to speed with the recommended procedures. That's a major issue. And then there is varying degrees of competence. Like there are very highly competent people who do who run systems, and they've been doing it for years, and they know how to take on new tasks and new roles and new systems. And then there are others who aren't necessarily up to scratch, and they don't necessarily teach you this in university. Like you do a undergrad degree in computer science, they're not going to teach you these processes, right? It happens outside of universities. It happens in more like the trade schools and stuff like that. And a lot of it's self-taught. A lot of people do it out of everything cannot be covered in your syllabus. And lastly, hiring people with both the right aptitude and the right attitude is something that's difficult to find, and you have varying degrees of that as well. I think these three are the things that come to mind, as non-technical issues that I faced, at least.
I agree with both of you. And going back to what Abhishek mentioned, I think organizational awareness, top to bottom, the awareness on the benefits, the return of investment, cost benefit, these are all typical stumbling blocks when we try to start something like this. I think those need to be considered very carefully. We have to have a compelling argument upfront to ensure that all key stakeholders are aware of the advantages of automation. I think that's one thing that I have seen when we try to roll out something new. And again, going back to what Akon mentioned, right? Hiring people with the right mix of skills, those all goes hand in hand. So this need to be thought through end to end before we embark on a journey, right? The proposal we need to obtain buy-in from all the stakeholders, identify who are those folks who need to sign off. These are some of the non-technical challenges that I have encountered myself.
All right. Thank you so much for that. We are going to dive straight into our next poll, but I'm going to pose this poll to you guys as well. How did you go about your automation journey? What to automate, where to stop, what metrics to observe, internal feedback loop, process changes. So we've got our options listed right there on the screen, but Akon, what do you think is going to be how do you expect this poll to turn out? Which you see one answer choice pulling ahead of the others? You were on mute.
I think started with basic task automation is where most people will be.
Does anyone agree or disagree? Have a different thought on that?
I think it depends, but I think by and large, I agree with Akon. Most people will be at that option. Some scripts are usually there, but there's not like a cohesive system in place. And it's a good place to start. I mean, there's nothing bad about that.
All right, well, I'm looking at the results come in, so I'm going to go ahead and pop up some early results. These are going to continue to update as we continue to get responses, but it looks like you are right that the majority of our respondents are pulling with C, started basic task automation. So I will pose this question back to SRE for us. So how do you go about your automation journey? How did you begin?
Start small, as most people have started. Take a phased incremental approach, and also identify the tasks that can be quickly automated. It's very important to get early wins from the key stakeholders when you embark on this journey. Try to identify those tasks that can be automated quickly and can be demonstrated, so that other folks would understand the advantage of the benefits of automating. This should also help freeing up of some of the SREs to take on more strategic activities. They should also see the benefit that the automation is bringing into their day-to-day job, measure and track some metrics, and look at the tactical workload on SREs pre-automation and how that has shifted after automation. How do they feel? What is the engagement level of employees? So those are some of the things that I have done. And specifically in a recent example where we have tackled a lot of alerts coming from the platform. These were actioned manually in the past, and with automation, it was very easy to convert these alerts to certain runbooks and actions taken by automation. So that's how I went ahead with pivoting from manual to automation.
So did you receive any kind of pushback from developers or any kind of resistance to these automation changes?
Some people were a little skeptical. There were not really pushback, but it was kind of wait and watch, right? What is the magic here? And after they saw the benefits, some of them turned around, and those detractors became promoters because they realized that this is to their advantage. And now they are able to go learn something new, do something new, not stuck on these mundane tasks, these repetitive tasks. So really, I did not receive a pushback, but there were a few people who wanted to wait and watch how things would play.
Abhishek, Akon, any similar experiences from your side?
I mean, I think it's becoming more and more clear, and that automation is needed. Standard procedures need to be put in place. Most people who've worked in keeping systems going, especially with today's world of 24/7, 365, people need to take vacations, and people need to be away, and they need to go to the doctor and the dentist and wherever else. So people do see that they want to keep their systems running while they're not actively babysitting it. And so you don't have to sell automation so much anymore. I think that awareness is there. What's missing is ways to be able to do it right, and that's where we are today, I think. And as Abhishek said earlier, the buy-in at the top level, at the executive level, and is there. Like, people understand the value of automation. They understand that it is a force multiplier. It can get people to become more efficient, but also your operational costs can go down significantly, especially your staffing side of things, and you can get your staff to do more interesting work and better work. So I don't think those are issues anymore. But over the years, like as the tools have gotten better, like your PagerDuties and things like that have come on board, and so that's made it a lot easier. But there's still a lot to do in my mind, and I think what the folks like Unscript are doing is really important here.
So Akon, there's something you just said about tools, and I think that plays a large part of it. What kind of requirements are you seeing for tools that are critical to the success of automation?
I think the ability to be able to write once and reuse, the ability to keep, have settings and things like that that are suitable for a particular environment and cater to a particular environment, and your ability to be able to move the same script or same automation from different environments and to be able to test it in lower environments, have versioning around that, not have credentials moving around, floating around and in documents and things like that is important. Not having to share credentials with someone in order to be able to access a cluster or something of that sort. These are things that have to be cleaned up, and a lot of that is not automated today.
So Sri, what do you look for when it comes to automation tools? Is there anything specifically, any specific requirements that you absolutely need to have first and foremost?
Obviously, the ease of use, which Akon referred to, is important. When we try to automate, we don't want a learning curve where the automation itself is a huge impediment. The implementation of automation shouldn't take too much. Other than that, I think the flexibility is quite important. Different organizations have different requirements. For instance, in our case, due to security compliance requirements, we couldn't use a tool that is being hosted on an external platform. So if this tool can have the flexibility and can be hosted internally, I think that kind of flexibility and agility is very important for adoption of such tools. And in our case, working with Unscript, we were able to overcome that challenge, and we were impressed with the agility that we could start using that tool in our environment.
Yeah.
Abhishek, anything to add on that?
Yeah, thanks, Sri and Egon. I think the ability to start small has been highlighted multiple times, right? Get something small to happen, to be able to show it to the stakeholders as, this is what is possible. Obviously, that's a organizational benefit, but there's more to it than that, right? Automating a bigger workflow. We don't really want to create a script which is like 3,000 lines long doing 200 steps, right? Because that's a maintenance nightmare. So having the ability to create modular automation and then have a pipeline type of architecture where I can borrow some of these smaller scripts and then put it together to find one bigger script. That is very helpful, both in terms of getting ease of adoption, as well as solving some of the more hairy use cases, right? So it gives us this maintainability. Now, also, what we should be doing is, automating what is repeatable first, right? And so there, if the tool comes in with some of these pre-built recipes, like resize a disk, move around some logs. These are the tickets that we are getting every day. And so having that ready to go, it helps teams a lot with kind of adopting a new tool and making it go, right? And also not having DSL, I think that's a great thing. I don't want, as Sri mentioned, I don't want a long, steep learning curve to do this adoption and then, get some wins out of it. What I want is, let's say I know some scripting language already, let's say Python. I want to be able to just use Python or Bash to kind of hammer out these things, right? So I think these are some of the critical requirements that tools should deliver in today's day to make automation easier for data operations teams.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's get a little bit more into the meat of what our topic is about today. And we are specifically talking about automating day 2 operations. So just to kind of preface this at a higher level, Abhishek, could you tell me a little bit about what exactly a day 2 operation is?
Absolutely. So, we have these complex systems that we have built out today. We have CI/CD. that helps us push out new releases to production. But then once things go out to production, now comes the day two period of time, right? And this means, troubleshooting, monitoring, observing what's going on, making changes to the application, maybe onboarding new customers, maybe looking at some alarms which are coming in from the observability tools, tickets from end customers. So these are some of the tasks that day two teams usually have to deal with.
All right, and so Akon, now that we've kind of covered what a day two operation is, how have you automated them? Where did you begin? Which automations have kind of paid off the most? What are your thoughts?
Wherever, data operations has always been there to some degree in any organization, and the ones that have automated more have seen a greater degree of success. I think that's a reality of anybody who's put things into production would agree with. I was at Yahoo many years ago, many moons ago, and we had a very large deployment there, and we tried to automate a lot of what's similar to what PagerDuty, etc. does back then with the infrastructure that we had within Yahoo. And so we've done it, but it's always been very handcrafted, very manual, and it always depended on the ability of the DevOps side or the operations folks to be able to have the chops to be able to build the scripts for themselves, and that's often hard. It's they have production outages and they have things to deal with on a day-to-day basis. When do they find time to go and do development like work? And so you want to basically have a system that allows you to take what you have, some script that you developed, to be able to quickly automate that and put that in an infrastructure that allows you to both test it and verify it in a lower environment, and then put it through the whole CI/CD pipeline itself, right? And so those are the kind of things that we should have, and that's where your tooling comes in, and we haven't had that in the past, in my mind.
Sri, what are you seeing as far as day two automations that are saving you the most time? Maybe some of the most useful in your company.
There are two areas where we have had the maximum benefit from automation. One is, like I mentioned previously, alerts. We get a ton of alerts from our platform, and many of these alerts are actionable. They are repetitive. We know what actions to take based on alerts. So that's one area where we have seen a substantial impact or benefit from automation. The second is scheduling, where customers need something to be, or we want to change something for a customer and it's outside business hours, and to keep track of when that need to be executed. And sometimes, human error, we might fail to execute something which we have already scheduled with the customer. So that's another area where we have seen a good number of manual tasks being shifted to automation. I think it's all left shifting. Previously, like Akon mentioned, that DevOps used to do it, then it moved to support. Now we need to move it to automation. And then with that left shifting, we can free up resources on this side to do other things. So I think it's a win-win for the company, for the customers, for the employees in different organizations who used to be involved in all these manual tasks.
All right, and Abhishek, have you seen any kind of measurable outcomes from automations you've implemented?
Absolutely. So we started with automating some of our health checks, right? Which is like something has gone wrong. Let's go look at these 5 outputs, which are spread across 5 different systems, and then try to get something out of it, which our support team can then relay back and say, hey, maybe some service needs to be restarted, or maybe this is an expected issue. It will resolve itself, so on and so forth, right? So right off the bat, what you can see is that MTTR improves rapidly, right? So instead of a human trying to figure out, what I need to do, which are the systems I need to go to, having an automated health check that spans all my application components. It's a single button click that gets me that information very quickly, right? Now, once you have a good health check in place, you can also imagine that the resolution for some of these more simpler problems, I would say, also becomes a single click, right? For example, a lot of times, let's say there's a deadlock or there's a memory leak or something like that. The resolution is to restart a service or restart a pod, restart a VM, some of these things, right? So having the health check give us exactly what's failing and then propose a remediation for that. It makes the cognitive load disappear from some of these on-call workflows, and also helps the team with maintaining their morale, that they are no longer stressed around troubleshooting these issues. These are always very stressful scenarios to be in. And then also the ability to drive down MTDR by just quickly resolving these problems. Things which used to take like few hours to get done can be done in a few minutes. That's something that customers of us will also appreciate, right? I mean, lower downtime is a win-win for everyone, both for the team and for the customer.
So we've got a company and their employees are pulling their hair out because they are doing everything manually. What are your words of encouragement to them to begin their automation on their day two operations? Sri, you want to get us kicked off there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to look at what are these activities and put them into different buckets. Automation is a very generic word. You don't want to start trying to automate everything, right? Don't try to go in the ocean. Just take a look at what are those tasks that can be automated easily, and start with that. And the lessons that you learn with that first phase of automation, you may want to consider those lessons when you go to the second phase. Look at the next set of tasks, which might be a little more complex, and take a modular approach. One by one, tackle those. And we also do not want to set expectations that automation is a magic wand where everything will be solved overnight, right? If you set that kind of expectation, you might be setting yourself up for failure. So be realistic. What can be done? Identify the right tool. Start slow. See the results. Measure. Define the metrics, success goals, and then move to the next step. That's how we have approached in the past, and that has worked quite well for us.
Yeah, I think you can start by setting up alerting, right? And then setting up procedures when alerts occur, and start small there, and then move on to diagnostics, essentially, where you have an alert and you set up your automation to figure out what went wrong. And as with healthcare, if you don't diagnose the problem correctly, you won't find the right solution. You won't find your patient will be sick. And so your systems have the same issue. Like you don't diagnose it right, and you're solving the wrong problem. And then you can move on to making solutions. Start small, like resetting systems, or rebuilding databases and things like that. Those things can be slowly automated. But you can start small, take it in small bites, and it's a continuous process, and use the best tools you can available, and they're becoming more and more available.
So, Akon, is there any kind of road bumps or any kind of early obstacles that somebody who's starting to implement automation will run into, and any best practices for way to avoid or circumvent those obstacles?
I think not doing a proper survey of what is available in your deployed environment is a problem. It can set you down the wrong path. So I would say start slow, do your research, figure out what are the best practices and tools that are available to you, and try to look for something over the horizon and say that, I eventually want to get to a particular point, and choose that point wisely and consult people, and consult the experts, consult your peers, and I think that'll get you started in the right direction. Because what could happen is that you could make a lot of false starts in that, and it could affect both morale as well as your expenses and stuff like that.
Sri, are there any obstacles that maybe you've personally run into throughout your automation journey?
I think like we discussed earlier, the thorough assessment is extremely important. You don't want any unpleasant surprises when you start on the automation roadmap. Other than that, I think the mindset of the people who are involved in the automation, make sure that they are all on the same page and they understand the benefits of doing this. Not talking about the executives, but the people who are going to benefit. Sometimes they may not see that automation is for their benefit. There could be job insecurity challenges, right? You don't know. People might internalize. So it's extremely important to be transparent, have discussions with them. It's not like we are automating to take away your jobs. We are automating to free you up. And like a participant mentioned, right? Better work-life balance. If you are in perpetual on-call, this is going to help you get out of that on-call. This is going to help you not to scramble when there is an alert, that you are not interrupt driven. You can focus on more strategic work. You can employ, this will be your work will be more fulfilling as you will be learning something new and doing something new. So those are the kind of challenges that I have encountered. One is people making sure that they understand the value, and the second is the thorough assessment.
But also, I mean, even if you end up doing, there are going to be ad hoc challenges that you have. If a lot of your mundane, regular tasks get automated, you can focus on doing a better job on things that require your concentration and require you to be able to look at something which is really complicated. Because there are no system is, there's no white box system in this world. You could know everything about the system and it could still misbehave in really weird ways, right? And again, as humans, we have only limited capacity to understand a particular system. We think we understand everything, but we don't. And so to be able to keep your energy and use your energy wisely to solve those hard problems, it requires a calm mind. It requires you to be rested, and it requires you to be able to perform at your best when you are needed to perform at your best. And so I think, as someone rightly said, work-life balance is important because of that reason. You need to be able to have the bandwidth to be in the mental capacity to be able to perform at that time.
All right. Well, it looks like participant 977, who told us better work-life balance is a key, also made the point that continuous improvement and automation sometimes causes individuals to be concerned about job security. So while that does seem like a really reasonable concern, what do you think about that? And what are some other concerns around automating production operations? Abhishek, you want to kick us off there?
Sure thing. Well, as we automate more of the mundane work, as Akon said, we are freed up to do some of the more challenging tasks, right? And very often, like today, people are actually drowning in their mundane toil, right? I've had people come to me and said, I don't have time to improve my work, right? Which is where people are, right? So we need to get away from this mindset, and we need to go to a growth-based mindset where we are automating things away. All these phone calls that we are taking and doing these repetitive tasks, we can kind of automate, move it to the machines, and then we can focus on what we were hired to do, really, right? We were not hired to basically shut no shut machines or bounce ports and that kind of thing, right? We were hired to actually build something bigger and better than that. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. We need to have a growth mindset over here, rather than worry about job security. As I think Shri also mentioned, the point is not to take away anyone's job. The point is to make sure that we are working on the right things. Right now, in terms of you asked like what are some of the risks that are associated with automation. So I would say automation is a journey, right? And the biggest risk is, you write some scripts, you put it in the wild, and they start misbehaving in some bad way. So what we want to have really is kind of a human in loop system, right? Where we are able to step through some of this freshly created automation. We have the whole thing under control. And then as we are building out the automation, we can kind of move to a point where we declare it safe and then really hand it off to a machines to maybe something which is an event driven system, like, when the alert fires, run this run, right? So it's a gradual process. And the tools need to allow for that. If the tool is like a all or nothing kind of an approach, that will likely result in failures. So that's my take on the risks here.
I think if you look at it from the programming perspective, programmers want to write good code, and imagine if they were not motivated to write good code because of job security, that they know the code, they don't document it well, they don't test it well, and so they have a job to keep fixing it. You're applying the same logic to operations. Why not write efficient processes that are reliable, and that your operations can be efficient like your code is efficient? If you apply the same logic here, then there will be people who will be ready to hire you to do the same job at their location. And so you can look at it as a skill to develop, so that you are the best operations person, because you have the best knowledge of the tools and the best industry practices. And I would look at it from that perspective, instead of looking at it from a job security perspective.
Sri, anything additional to add, or are you in agreement with Abhishek and Akon?
I am in agreement. There was this question about what other concerns around automating. One consideration is knowledge among the team. When we are doing manual processes, there is a lot of tribal knowledge. Some of that could be documented, but as we create more and more runbooks and automate, it is very important to document those as well. And when we start on the automation plan, there should be a plan B or a fallback mechanism. If for some reason we have to temporarily pause automation while we review or assess, and we want to fall back to manual, it's not like overnight change everything to automation. So those are two areas I think potentially challenging when you do the automation. Then again, the job security, as all of us discussed, it's extremely important to have those transparent communication. If you don't communicate, other people may assume that the reason behind automation is something else. So we have to show that value proposition has to be very clear, and we had to have those conversations to address concerns.
So, what concerns might someone at the executive level? What are some concerns they may have, and how can you calm those concerns?
So I think the concerns that you might typically encounter at the executive level is not job security. Those concerns would be the return of investment, right? Whereas the individual contributor level, the concerns probably would be job security. So for the executive level, if you are able to present a return of investment and a cost benefit analysis upfront, that would be the objection handling. But if you are not, and we take a phased approach, do something incremental, show the value, and then get the buy-in, that would be a much easier journey.
Any varied responses, or are we all in agreement there?
No, I think it's spot on.
Perfect. So we've got about 15 minutes left. So I do want to take this opportunity to remind our audience to send in any questions you might have. We do have plenty of time to address your questions. But moving on to our next one, it looks like we need to take a look at the future. What role do you think automation will play in the future of day 2 operations? Akon, you went off mute real fast. You want to take us there?
I think as automation becomes and as tools become more and more available, and the awareness of of day 2 operations being what it is, it's really an important part of the success of your company or whatever you do. I think it just is going to get better over time. I see that happening. I also think that the awareness among both executives and others is becoming more and more evident. Like people do recognize that their operational excellence is and their operability of their systems is really important for them to both be able to scale as well as to be successful. So I don't think those are any I don't see any concerns there. I think it'll just get better over time.
Sri, do you have anything on the horizon that you think will be the next big thing in automation, or what are you seeing right now as the current development in automation?
I think AI is going to play a vital part in automation. Automation is the first step, right? Moving away from manual processes, converting the repetitive tasks to automation. But once we get better at automation, I think the next level will be a system which will automatically track the manual tasks and maybe convert them to automation, identify which of those tasks are fit for automation, automatically roll out those. And we can already see those, the changes, rapid strides made by ChatGPT and all the goodness that we are getting from AI. I think automation will also benefit from the AI evolution that we are seeing now. So it will be like automating automation, right? Today, the automation is so to convert from manual to automation, human involvement is there. Maybe tomorrow it is like observe and automate by itself.
Akon, are you seeing about the same, or you have a different direction this may go?
No, I think it's pretty accurate. I think that's what we'll see, and it might be faster than we think it is, given how things have changed in the last few years. So, we might see things move faster than we expected.
And Abhishek, is there anything you're looking forward to in the world of automation?
Absolutely. As Sri mentioned, I think AI has made great strides. And there's really two parts where it can help us a lot. And one is to identify these repetitive tasks and perhaps even create the recipes for them as well, right? So, by monitoring the humans, clone them. Maybe that's not the right way to say that, but that's, those are some of the repetitive tasks that it can learn and automate. And the second is really more of a recommendation type of a system, right? I'm seeing certain things happen in my system right now. What are the recommendations, right? And this is where AI can excel as well, having a good handle on the historical data. It can kind of indicate to us which recipe to use, right? And lastly, ChatGPT is here. Google created its own thing. So generative AI is useful as well. The ability to generate code for some of these menial tasks. I think over time it will improve. And the tools need to be there to be able to take advantage of these advancements, right? So ChatGPT, for example, it can very easily generate like a Python function to do some of these things. Let's say restart a virtual machine or a pod or whatever you have, right? So what it means is that as long as you are adhering to some standards, like let's say using some open formats, maybe using Python, open programming languages, these benefits will be easily accessible inside the tools, right? Whereas if you have like a closed ecosystem, you can't really do that, right? So we have to be open about these things, and that will help us take maximum benefit out of the coming developments.
Yeah, I think the number of times you end up on Stack Overflow to solve a problem because a product does not have the right documentation or the degree of depth in the documentation that you need to operate a system. Essentially, that is where AI will essentially help a lot in my mind, because a lot of that is based off of machine learning, how a system operates and how it is operated upon and kept running. And so I think that's where a lot of things AI will affect.
Yeah, and the good news over there is that the world is becoming more homogeneous, right? So everyone is adopting cloud native, which means that the components people have for their applications are fairly standard, right? And so everyone is facing these problems. So the knowledge which is captured in resources like Stack Overflow, for example, it is actually pertinent, right? We have moved on from the era of building custom systems, and we are in an era where community support is actually a possible thing.
So we've got just a couple minutes left, but I do want to make sure that we tackle the security perspective of this. So how do you see automation playing a role in an organization approaching digital immunity, or is that a moving target that we'll always be chasing? Akon?
I think security is always going to be a challenge. It's always a moving target, unfortunately. But I think this will, if the tooling enables you to improve your security, your ability to secure your systems, then that's the best outcome. That's probably one of the most important things that we can get out of this. And the fact that people today, it's scary. Like, there are systems out there that we depend on, that where people, the folks who keep those systems running, often don't follow the right processes, which is why we see all these breaches that we've seen so far, and it does affect every one of us. So I think it's going to be something that's going to be a continuous challenge, but automation will help it, in my opinion.
I think automation is actually quite helpful there, because today credential sharing is like more broad-based. So if I have username, password to a database, I can do n number of things. Whereas, I was only supposed to do something very specific, right? And there's no way to control that. So having that automation in place, having some playbooks or runbooks which are ready to go, help with those challenges, right? So now all I want to do is I want to run the script which does this very specific task, right? So I'm no longer given access to like a broad-based privilege, as I'm given very specific privilege using a workflow or a run.
All right, so it looks like we are nearing the end of our time together today. So I do quickly just want to remind everyone that this session was recorded. And should you want to rewatch or share with a friend, you will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand. Or as always, you can find it living on the Container Journal website at containerjournal.com/webinars. I will quickly give away a couple of gift cards before we go around and do our closing words. But our 4 $25 Amazon gift card winners are Wade N, Timothy M, Cy N, and Carrie P. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you don't happen to receive that in about the next 48 or so hours, please do check your spam folder. All right, so let's go ahead and start closing things out. Akon, is there anything that you'd like to leave our audience with before we close? Any final words when it comes to automating their day 2 operations?
I think education of the organization is really important from the top down. So anybody who's in a role like Shri, for instance, I think it would be important for them to first of all understand what is happening. Obviously talk to your peers, talk to folks like Abhishek who are building these kind of systems, and understand what they can do for you, and then educate your organization as to the benefits of those and the potential pitfalls of that you might end up or the potholes that you might end up hitting. And so I think that's something that I would say would be one thing that, if there's any one takeaway that you can have from this webinar, it would be that I think getting educated and understanding what tools are available to you and what the benefits of them could be and how to use them would be a good start.
All right, Sri, we'll go to you next.
I agree. Continuous learning and the situational awareness of how things are changing. That is one thing that we all should be constantly learning what's happening in the world. Second thing is to have a perspective where you find automation is an opportunity to up-level yourself and your team. Right? That is the key ingredient here in automation. Your team is going to benefit. They are going to get to the next level. They are going to do better things, bigger things with automation taking care of the mundane tasks. And that approach, and continuously radiate that philosophy to all you interact with. I think that's one thing I would like people to do going forward.
And Abhishek, if you'd like to take us home.
Sounds good. Start small on your automation journey. Don't aim for the moon. Start with the repetitive toil that you are spending your 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes every day on. And then as you are building out, make sure to keep it modular so that you can share your automation within your team as well as outside your team, which means you have to create parameters. You have to make sure that, it's not like some hard-coded script or something. And when you do it like that, your team will start adopting it both within and across organizational boundaries. And then that's really when your process is working, right? So if you try doing it like this, you will start seeing the benefits almost immediately, both in terms of saved time and also in terms of sharing your knowledge across the team.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Abhishek, Sri, and Akon. I really appreciate getting to know you guys in our 30-minute setup session and then speaking with you today. I know I'm coming away with a lot, and I hope our audience is too. So thank you all once more.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks, Akon. Thanks, Sri.
I'd like to thank Unscript for sponsoring our program today, and to everyone who has been with us for the past hour. Thank you so much. We really appreciate the time that you take to join us, and we would just like to ask for one extra moment of your time for a survey that will be popping up as soon as we close out. Let us know your thoughts on today's program, or maybe what you'd like to see on an upcoming program. Otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at an upcoming Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.